welcome to Women in Recruitment's webinar, Unleash the Success You Deserve. We hold these webinars on a bi-monthly basis for all our members. Today we've opened it out to everyone to give you a taster of what we do. I've just realised I wasn't going to introduce myself. I'm Nicola Malarkey. I'm co-chair for Women in Recruitment. I'm going to give you a brief overview of Women in Recruitment. Then I'm going to hand over to Katie Botton to share our online programme, The Power of Me. At the end of the webinar, we'll share how you can get involved, how you can get access to The Power of Me, and what else we have lined up for our members. So a little bit about Women in Recruitment. Women in Recruitment was formed to give recruitment firms and individuals access to unique personal development tools, mentoring, and networking opportunities. We support recruitment firms in attracting, developing and retaining female talent and to provide tangible demonstration of a commitment to equality for their employees, clients and candidates. A little bit about how The Power of Me came about. So Women in Recruitment, Gayatri, can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah. Excellent. Women in Recruitment basically carried out some research in collaboration with Westminster Business School. The research showed, as well as our experience, that within the sector, businesses wanted to give their staff the tools and support they needed to develop their careers and to fulfil their potential. In response to this, Women in Recruitment developed, in collaboration this time with Katie Botton, who you can see on the screen there, our online programme, The Power of Me. It's an online personal and career development programme. It allows you to get focused on you and discover how to make career decisions more easily and feel more confident and resilient. How the most successful people use their strengths to energize them and drive performance. And what is most likely to trip you up and derail you on your career. I'll hand over to Katie in a moment. She's the Managing Director of Engaging Performance and the designer of the Power of Me programme. But before I do, let me just tell you a little bit about her. Katie's a psychologist, coach and facilitator. She is a chartered member of the CIPD and a Master Business Practitioner of NLP. Katie has over 30 years experience supporting people to bring out the best in themselves at work. She's worked in HR, organisational development, change management in financial services for many years, and before starting up her own consultancy and focusing on coaching and leadership development across a range of sectors. She is qualified to use a range of psychometric tools and has used StrengthScope extensively with her clients. StrengthScope is one of the tools that we use within The Power of Me, which is amazing, basically to support her clients' success and fulfillment at work. So Katie, I've known you for a few years now. I'm going to hand over to you to tell us more about The Power of Me.
Okay, thank you very much, Nicola. And just to say, yes, Nicola and I met a few years ago, and I was delighted to, after some conversations with her, get very involved with Women in Recruitment and have the opportunity to design a programme to meet those needs that Nicola's already identified, to help people get more focused on themselves, on their careers, on the sorts of decisions that will get them the best results, and blend into that some of the kind of leading edge thinking around what helps people succeed at work and get more, get better results, feel more fulfilled, and really critically be able to be more resilient in the face of setbacks, feel more confident, and understand what might be getting in their way and how to overcome that. So as Nicola said, it's something that I feel very strongly about and have worked with individuals for a long time to really help them grow and flourish in their careers, and that's something which really energises me. And that's a key component of this programme, is helping individuals to find out what really energises them, where their strengths lie and how they can use those to best effect. And it's really about allowing people to be more authentic, to understand what works best for them, and feel that they can have good open conversations around what suits them, what they're good at, what fulfills them, and how they can develop their careers in a really positive way. So the research shows that some of the things we've been led to believe about how to develop ourselves may not be that helpful. So there's a big myth around needing to develop our weaknesses, and this is something which for a lot of us probably even started when we were at school. So if you came home with a report which had lots of A's and B's and perhaps one D or maybe even an E, probably the response you got was not, this is brilliant, look at all the things you're good at, but actually what's going on, why is there something which you're not as good at. So it's something which is quite ingrained in a lot of people's minds, and certainly a lot of organisations have also followed that lead in terms of getting people to focus on their weaknesses rather than their strengths. And there's an awful lot of research now, particularly in the area of positive psychology, which is incredibly compelling and demonstrates that our greatest potential lies in the areas where we're innately inclined, where we're naturally energised, where we have a talent or a gift which we can optimise, and that actually our ability to develop our weaknesses is really quite limited. I will say a little bit more about weaknesses later, because I'm not advocating that you should ignore weaknesses, but there are better ways to manage those than just to think you've got to develop in that area. So one of the things that is really critical is being able to get clear about our strengths and understand them so that we can use them optimally and build skills around those strengths as well, which makes them more effective. So what I often find quite surprising when I talk to people about their strengths is that we don't necessarily understand them or recognise them as well as we could do, perhaps because we take them for granted, or perhaps because, as I've explained, there's been more of an emphasis on needing to develop our weaknesses rather than exploring our strengths and finding how we can make those work for us. So I thought it'd be useful just to do a little experiment. So just whilst you're listening to me, just have a think, how easy is it for you to identify your top 2 weaknesses? If you've got an opportunity to jot that down, do that now, or just think of something, a couple of things that maybe spring to mind in terms of things that have been illustrated in appraisals or things that have been in your mind around the areas that you're not so good at. And I'm just wondering, perhaps just a quick show of hands in terms of whether people have been able to come up with a couple of weaknesses. How quickly and easily were you able to do that? So just show us your hand if it was easy to come up with something that you feel.
Yeah, a lot of them.
Lots of hands being shown. Okay.
There's a question as well. One was easy and the second wasn't.
Okay, so but certainly
That's
one
true.
came to mind quickly.
Yeah.
Okay, so then the second question, so what would be 2 key strengths that you would feel very confident that you could describe clearly, that would help you stand out, that would differentiate you from the crowd? How easy is it to do that?
Show of hands again.
So yeah, let's just see what a show of hands.
Again, there's a question on that. So
Yeah. I've got a question.
Oh no, it's just more like
You've got
what
both.
she says, yeah.
Good. So it's quite an interesting thing just to reflect on. People generally have a lot more access to knowing what they're not so good at and are less able to be really clear about what their strengths are. So, for example, it's also about being able to be very specific about your strengths. So one of the common things that people might come up with when I ask them about their strengths, and could well be something that for some of you is what comes up, is working with people, enjoying working with people, getting the best from people, which is helpful, but it's still quite generic. And actually being able to be much more precise about how your strengths are working for you and what they really look like is absolutely key. So that's one of the things that really differentiates people who are successful in their careers from those who have perhaps have more challenges, is that the precision that you can have around your strengths. So if we took that example of enjoying working with people, for example, it could be that within that, and with the benefit of a psychometric tool, you can get much clearer. So that can have different flavours. For example, is it about developing people, helping them to bring their potential to the fore? Is it about leading people, so providing direction, being the inspiration? Is it about building relationships with people, building collaborations, or perhaps it's more that you feel you're someone who can very much understand other people's perspectives and emotions, and you want to provide that kind of emotional or more personal support. So just having that extra degree of clarity around strengths can be really powerful. So I'll just say a little bit more about what we mean by strengths in this context, just to be absolutely clear, because there is a distinction between a strength as something which you're good at and a strength as something which you are really energised by. And that's the definition that we work with, which is a strength is something where you feel energised, motivated, able to perform it effectively over a period of time, something that really brings out the best in you, as opposed to something which you could be good at but perhaps drains you or doesn't excite you or interest you. Perhaps it never has, or perhaps it's kind of lost its sparkle. So that's just helpful, I think, to keep that in mind in terms of the definition. So we'll come back to strengths in a bit more detail in a moment. But before that, I'll just tell you a little bit about the structure of the programme, The Power of Me. So there are 3 main phases. The first one, evaluate, is really allowing you to take a step back. So something that people don't always do in their careers, which is have a period of self-reflection, maybe look at what's working, what's not working so well, and also think about where they've been and what lessons they might have already gleaned from their career to date. So it is about just evaluating what you've learned already and going a little bit deeper into what might be the things that you need to take forward into your career. The second phase, energize, is where we get really much more detailed about your strengths. So you have the opportunity to do the psychometric questionnaire online, and you get a personalised report which is delivered to you, and then lots of support around how to make that work for you. So what sort of actions does that mean you can take? How can you have good conversations around your strengths with the people that matter, and think about how you can really use that information in an intentional and skillful way. And then the final phase, excel, is kind of bringing everything together. So using everything you've learned to develop a compelling personal brand, so being able to talk confidently about what you're good at, what you want, how you can support your clients, and also to think about what you might need to develop in terms of skills around resilience, so that you can stay on track and bounce back from any setbacks that might occur. So I'll just go into these in a little bit more detail. So the first phase, as I mentioned, evaluate, it's really about giving an opportunity to reflect, to look back and just be really clear. So it's very much about developing your self-awareness. So there's a tool for understanding your learning styles, really being knowing what works for you in terms of how you're going to learn best, what's the quickest way for you to take information in, how are you going to develop your skills. There's an exercise around values. So again, what matters most to you in your career? What are the things that you absolutely need to have in place to feel that you're working effectively, that the environment suits you? So by values, I mean, it could be something like autonomy for excitement, or excitement, for example. Perhaps achievement is the most important thing to you, or a sense of belonging, being part of a team. So it's really an opportunity to get a little bit under the surface of what's going on for you in your career and understand that really clearly. I'll share with you a couple of the tools that we use, because these are things that you could have a think about after the webinar. So one of them is what we call the career timeline. So the career timeline is a tool which allows you to look back over your career and think about perhaps the highs and lows, the turning points, the significant events that perhaps have altered the course of your career or you've learned something from. And again, just with the benefit of a bit of hindsight, to look at it and think, well, what does that tell me? When have been the times when I've been most in alignment, when have I felt most successful, when have I been at my best, had my best results? Thank you. And also what was maybe not in place, or what was there that wasn't helpful to me when I've had the lower points in my career. So it's a good opportunity to. Sorry, that's it. No, it's okay. Thank you. So yeah, so it's a good opportunity. It's just a simple 2 axes. So think about when you've been at your most fulfilled, had the most job satisfaction, and plot that over time. So think about those highs and lows. an example for me when I did this exercise, just to illustrate it a little bit more, was there have been a few times in my career where I was involved in quite complex restructuring and organisational change projects. And one of them I felt was absolutely probably one of the high points of my career, and another was really not, was really draining and really I found very difficult. And ostensibly they were the same activity, but the first one had a lot more opportunity for me to be creative, to come up with ideas, to get to know the individuals that were involved, to think about how we could really change the organisation for the better. And the second one was a much more transactional approach. Probably the environment didn't suit me as well. Managers were looking at individuals more as resources that could be outsourced. There was a much more focus on short-term savings rather than looking at people's career and potential and skills. So it gave me some really good insights into what was the right environment for me to be in, what mattered, and how that affected my energy and also and results. So Gabe, do you want to just... Yeah. So there's another tool here which again you may find is quite a useful thing just to think about after the webinar. This is more about what's going on in your current situation. So an opportunity to just do what I call a career reality check. So key steps here are just outline what are the sorts of things, the main activities that you would do on say a weekly basis. So 4 or 5 things which take up the majority of your time. And then have a think about where do they sit on these 2 axes. So how satisfying, how fulfilling is that activity for you? And also how well do you think you're doing it? Is it something you're doing really, really well? Sorry, the slides seem to have got a mind of their own. So is it an activity you are doing really well, or is it something where you feel you're not performing as well as you could? So again, there's an opportunity here just to step back and think more reflectively about what could you start to influence in your career. So if you found, for example, that you've got a lot of activities which you're doing very well, but you're not inspired by, aren't fulfilling you, then perhaps there's a little message there for you that you've been pigeonholed, that you might be a bit in a comfort zone, or that other people rely on you to do a job which you do very well, but actually there's not much scope there for you to grow, you're not really being challenged. And just thinking about what does that distribution look like for you? Have you got enough activities where there's lots of energy, lots of interest and excitement, and there's scope for you to get better at them and to do more of them? So what we look at in the programme is, once you've done that kind of analysis, what are the actions that are available to you? So what sorts of things can you do to start maybe just tweaking things a little bit, having some conversations, thinking about how to change the focus so that you've got more activities in the areas that are really driving you, that you're going to be able to excel in. Thanks, Katrin. The other piece that we look at in the evaluate phase is what I call, in the sort of generic sense, it's about resources. So what have you got on your side? And again, I think from my experience of working with a lot of individuals is there can be a risk that we all tend to just try and do things on our own, and that we don't engage enough active support from other people, think about what support might be available. So there's then an opportunity to think about goals, to get really intentional, think the things you've learned from your career timeline, and what is it that you want? What do you want more of in your career, and how can you set a goal that will really allow you to optimise that? And then what sort of things are either working or not working for you in terms of resources? So there's internal resources, which could be mindset, thoughts, beliefs, all of the things which sometimes are unconscious, some of them you might be more or less conscious of, but how helpful are they? What's working for you, what's not, and what can you do about those? And then also to look at the external support network. So go to just... Yeah, so thinking about intentionally building a career support team. Most people, I think, are familiar with having a sponsor, perhaps, maybe a mentor. Coaching, obviously, again, is another way that you can get support in your career. But actually, how well developed is your own support team? Who's got your back? And who are all the people that you can count on to give you different perspectives? So I think of this, it's a bit like your own sort of company board of directors. You've got different people doing different roles who see you in different ways. So for example, you might have what we call your collaborators. So that could be your colleagues or your friends at work. You know, how do they support you? What do they give you? How can you support them? Who are the people who maybe can give you really good feedback, so they see you on a regular basis and can give you feedback if you're working on something specific, or would like some insights into what behaviours are working for you and what aren't. And then also thinking strategically about your network. Who have you got in your network that could connect you to other people? Who are kind of senior sponsors who might be able to help you build your reputation, open doors for you? So again, just some strategies and tools to help you really optimise the direction that your career takes. So let's talk a little bit more about strengths again here. So the second phase of the programme allows you to, as I mentioned, get very clear about your own particular strengths. So we call your top 7 strengths your significant strengths, and those are the ones that are probably going to do most of the heavy lifting for you. So they're the strengths that you can really learn more about, work out if they're being used as much as you could do, what sort of skills might complement those strengths, and get really clear on that. I mentioned the Strengths Partnership earlier. So Strengths Partnership are the organisation that developed StrengthScope, the questionnaire, the psychometric. And I love their purpose statement, which I'll just read to you, which is to ensure that everyone's able to have honest, authentic conversations about what makes them truly unique, what they love to do, and how they can bring their best to work and to life every single day. And that, I think, is such a, well, for me, it's such a positive intention. And the more people we can get having those conversations and supporting each other, I think that the better it is for all of us. So this is just an excerpt from what the report, from the StrengthScope report. So it's almost unheard of, I can't remember the exact statistic, to have a strengths profile that's the same as anybody else's. So it's not really like a personality questionnaire in that actually your strengths profile is unique to you. It really does show how your individual set of strengths can be combined in effective ways, how they can really support you. And this, as you'll see from this diagram, it also helps you to see what sort of distribution of strengths you've got. So there's 4 different quadrants. So relational strengths, which is the ones that are to do with how you interact with people. Then there's the execution strengths, which are in the right-hand bottom corner. So that's how do you get results, how do you make things happen. Then the thinking strengths, which are the blue quadrant. So again, that's more about how do you think, how do you interact with ideas and data. And then the green, the emotional strengths, which are often the ones that people don't necessarily recognise in themselves so easily. So they can be quite a revelation for people in terms of where do they get their emotional strengths from. It could be around optimism, enthusiasm, resilience, and how to really make those work for them as well. So seeing that distribution and understanding where your different strengths lie, how you can use those more effectively together, and also how you might use strengths to compensate for areas where you're less energised can be really helpful. So if you're like a lot of people, the first thing you do when you see a strengths profile is ignore the top 7, which are the purple bars, and go immediately to the short blue bars, which is, again, I think a product of the fact that we've all spent so many years thinking about our weaknesses. But we certainly don't ignore weaknesses, but there is a lot of emphasis on thinking, how do you use those strengths as effectively as possible and make those work for you?
Katie, that's exactly what we did. The executive team at Women in Recruitment, when we did the StrengthScope, when we got our report, we saw our 7 strengths, and the next thing we did was, what's our least? It's interesting how we gravitate to find out where we feel our weaknesses are.
Yeah, and it is our conditioning, absolutely. And I think it's safe to say, for my however many years in my career, my weaknesses are still the same as they were when I first started work. So, for example, if I was asked to come up with a really detailed plan for something or get into the finer points of negotiating a contract, It's not to say I couldn't do it, but my heart wouldn't really be in it. Probably would take me longer than some other people who would relish those sort of tasks. So it is kind of fruitless to try and think you can develop your weaknesses, but you absolutely do need the awareness of them so that they're not getting in your way.
One of the things that I learned, but correct me if I'm wrong, is just because the bars show that they're quite low, and it shows that it could be a weakness, it's not necessarily you're not good at it. You could be very good at it, but it doesn't energize you.
That is exactly it. So, and I think this is one of the traps that people can fall into in their careers, that they can get pigeonholed into doing things which they're very good at through experience or through, they can do it, but they may not really be where they can excel or to feel really excited and satisfied with what they're doing. So it's absolutely critical. The other way to think about weaknesses in this model is that they're weakeners, as in you can do them, but perhaps doing those things it's more tiring, it's more draining. When you're using your strengths, typically you can keep going. Or at the end of the day, where you've been using your strengths, you feel good. You don't feel tired and anxious and stressed and worn out. It's actually something which fuels you.
Brilliant. Thank you.
So let me just, do you want to just go on? Thank you. So we absolutely don't ignore weaknesses. That's not the message. The message is that we need to be cleverer about what we do with our weaknesses. We need to manage them. So it could be that you find ways perhaps to collaborate with somebody else who's good at something that you're not. Sometimes you do need to get good enough at doing something so that it's not getting in your way, but you probably may never become an expert, for example. So thinking about how significant are the weaknesses? Are they relevant? Do they matter? Are they going to get in your way? Some weaknesses, yes, you've got to take some action. Others we would identify as allowable weaknesses, and an allowable weakness is something you don't need to worry about, particularly in that particular job, if that's what's relevant at the moment. But one of probably the most insightful things that comes from this approach is understanding how actually the biggest source of your weakness, your potential career derailers, your blind spots are actually your strengths when you don't know how to manage them effectively or appropriately. So as you can see from this quote here, strengths in overdrive can ultimately become a performance risk if they're not effectively managed. And research shows that career derailment at work is associated to strengths in overdrive rather than lack of skill or competency. And this is, I would say, is such a helpful thing to understand about yourself, is when sometimes your strengths can actually be working against you. When something that you do naturally, that's innate, that you rely on heavily, is overused or used inappropriately in a particular situation, it can be the thing that really does get in your way. And by a career derailer, I mean something which is an obstacle to your career progression. So I'll give you some examples of that in a moment, but it's something which is a real eye-opener for people when they discover how their strengths go into overdrive. And what we also help you to do in the programme is identify what the triggers might be. So what sort of thing might trigger a strength into overdrive? It could be that you're very stressed, you're under a lot of pressure, perhaps you're having to work with somebody who's got very different strengths from you, so doesn't bring out the best in you. So just being much clearer about what could trigger this and how to make sure you're what we call kind of dialing up or dialing down your strengths to the appropriate level so that you're really getting the most from them. So I'll give you some examples. So here are 4 of the strengths that come from the Strength Scope model. So the Strength Scope model's got 24 work-based strengths, and for each of them you'll have the definition of the strength, what it looks like at its best, but also what it looks like if it's not a strength to you, if it's a weakener, or if you're using it too much, if it's in overdrive, what that looks like. In the report as well, you get lots of suggestions for how to develop the strengths, how to use them more effectively as well. So here are 4 that we felt were quite relevant to recruiters particularly. So persuasiveness as a strength is one of the relational strengths, so in terms of how you deal with people. So someone with a persuasiveness strength, when they're at their best, they love winning agreements, they're somebody who wants to sell, they want to influence, they like getting support for a position or a desired outcome, so they'll be quite tenacious around those things. But in overdrive, without necessarily realising it, what can happen is that you can try to influence most outcomes in your favour, irrespective of whether it's actually important, or you might just get tempted to indulge in debate just for the sake of it, rather than focusing on relevant outcomes. So what happens when a strength goes into overdrive is you get an unintended outcome. So rather than then getting people on side, you might find that you're actually getting people kind of riling against the fact that you're pushing too hard, or that you're looking to kind of win, if you like, for the sake of winning. So it's the unintended consequences that are the problem with strengths in overdrive. So if we look at the next one, results focus, so this is in the execution quadrant, so how you make things happen. So if you've got a results focus, you're at your best when you're focusing on results, you're driving tasks and projects to completion. So you get really energised by tangible results, seeing things happen, making things happen. The overdrive of this strength is that you might miss important details of the task and the project. So things like the opportunity to reflect and learn, well, instead of just moving on to the next thing, actually being able to review, to think about what the lessons have been. And one of the common things that you see with results focus in overdrive is that you get so focused on making things happen that you sometimes can sort of forget about the fact that you might need to take people with you, and recognising them for their efforts and think about their feelings and the way that they're impacted by it. So I don't know if anyone's getting any sense of recognition or any light bulbs going on here, but this is often what happens with strengths in overdrive, is that you see the positive of the strength, but then you can start to see, actually, yes, sometimes maybe that's what happens for me, and it's not that helpful. So enthusiasm is one of the emotional strengths, and when someone's using that strength really effectively, they're demonstrating passion and energy, so they're really good communicators, they're able to explain about what they care about, their beliefs, their interests, their ideas. And I can immediately think of somebody who has enthusiasm in overdrive when I read this definition, but someone who's got enthusiasm in overdrive can just sometimes be a bit too emotive, too overwhelming, or so that actually people get a bit turned off by their views rather than being enthused by them, because they feel they're not being listened to, or they're not being valued or appreciated. So as you can probably hear from these definitions, it's all about getting the balance right, just making sure that you've got the strength at the appropriate level with the right people, that you're using it in the right way. And then finally, critical thinking. So this is in the thinking quadrant. So people who've got a critical thinking strength are at their best when they're dealing with information. They can break it down systematically, they're evaluating it objectively, they're very logical, they can spot flaws in a plan, they're very good at seeing risks. In overdrive, these are the people that sometimes can be perceived as critical or picky, as opposed to having critical thinking. So they might be seen as negative or overly critical by other people. So again, it's very much about just recognising what that impact can be on others and making sure that you're using the strength really effectively. So just a few moments, and then we'll have a bit of an opportunity for some questions. But the final phase of the programme is what we call Excel, and this is really just bringing everything together. So thinking everything you've learned about yourself, your strengths, your goals, all of these things. What are you going to do with it? How can you have a compelling personal brand where you can let people know what you want, how, the fact that you're well suited to those things, and actually make sure that you've got good visibility. So you've got your career success team in place, but what else can you do to enhance your visibility, whether that's online activities, offline networking, thinking about how you really communicate your worth. And then there's also some pointers around looking after yourself, your resilience, making sure that you can stay the course, that you can be, that what you're doing is sustainable, that it's good for you, good for your career, good for your organisation. So it's really just the final rounding off of all of those things and giving you some support to put that in place. So just a final little statistic on strengths, which is, I think, quite compelling, that productivity can increase by 38% when employees have the opportunity to do what they do best each day. And that's really what is at the heart of this programme. It's about allowing you to do what you do best and getting your best results from that. So just a couple of pointers really in terms of whether this is right for you, who the programme would suit. It's certainly designed with that everybody can get something from it, because your insights will be based on your own self-awareness, your own strengths. But it could be particularly helpful if maybe you're feeling a bit stuck or demotivated, if you're thinking about reviewing your career options, maybe you're about to take some parental leave or coming back from that. Or it could be perhaps you feel that you've got a lot more to offer and you want to get more recognition and be able to demonstrate your contribution more visibly and more effectively. So it is something where the onus is on you. It's a self-managed programme. We know how busy everyone is, so we've made it as flexible as possible, but we've also given it an end date. So you've got 3 months to work through the materials so that it is something that you need to attend to and get focused on. And very much, as I said, it's about, if you put the work in, that's how you get the results. Although it's something you can do on your own, if you've got somebody who can mentor you through it, or a colleague that might be doing it with you as well, again, I think it's a really positive thing to think about. How can you bring it to life as much as possible? Make sure that you've got that commitment to yourself, that you put the time aside and actually give yourself the opportunity to take all the benefits that come from this. So I think that's me. Nicola, do you want to add anything else before we do questions?
No, that's wonderful. No, I have no problems. Go for it. If anyone has any questions, then please pop them in the box. I actually have a question, if you don't mind.
Yes, please do. As long as it's not too long.
Not a planned one, but I just want. I dug out my strength scope, and I was curious. You know how you've got your strengths and your weaknesses.
Mm-hmm.
Is there I noticed they're graded from 0 to 10. Is there if it's below a certain number, you really need to work on that weakness? Or, do you know what I mean? Because I was looking and my lowest one is just under 4. And you're sitting there going, it's compassion. Apparently, yeah. So I can be compassionate, but it's obviously not a strength of mine. Does that indicate how bad you are at it? Or how...
No, and again, I think that's back to that conditioning, isn't it? That you think if you're not energized by something, that must be in some way bad. The whole philosophy around this is that we all get results in different ways. We're all different. So let people do the things that they're really good at. Let people be energized by the things that are natural and right for them. In terms of the length of the bars, what's important for you is the relative lengths on your profile. So you're not looking at under a certain number means this or that, but actually some people tend to have all short bars. They just, the way they answer the questions, they just don't have such, they tend maybe a bit more reserved in the way they answer the questions. Other people have lots of long bars. The key is relative for you. Where are you energized? Where are you not so much? And absolutely doesn't mean you can't be compassionate. It just means that in your work, the things that are going to energize you, there's other things that will come first.
Yes, definitely. Okay,
Does that make sense?
No, that's brilliant. Does anybody else have any questions they want to pop in the boxes at all? I haven't seen any yet. Have you, Gayatri?
No, not yet. Haven't seen any yet.
I'll wait another moment just in case. Well, if something comes up, let me know, Gayatri, so I'll just keep going.
There's one question that just came up. One moment.
Oh, awesome.
So how much time does this take over the 3 months?
So Kim, your question, how much time does it take over the 3 months? It is a bit of a difficult one to be really specific about, because people very much work at different paces with this, and some people are more reflective and they take longer to think about things than others. But I think as a rule of thumb, you probably would need to set aside a couple of hours a week to really make good progress. But as I say, it is quite subjective, because some people will move through it faster than others.
So because this is an online program, you may have that flexibility to you can allocate your time, you can do a good
Yes.
time management and do it whenever you feel you get the time to do it. So it really helps that way. Yeah. And any other questions from the board? So we have launched this course on the website. So if you do have any queries, you can always contact us. You can contact Julie Selby. One moment. There's another question that just came up.
No, one of the things I wanted to share, if that was okay, is for the Power of Me, you don't actually need to be a member of Women in Recruitment to actually get access to the Power of Me. So we've made it accessible to as many people as we can. It isn't female orientated. It can be completed by men as well. So it's only £175 if you're a non-member and £99 if you're a member. I've also, on the page before, Gayatri, if you can go back to that one, what I've just done on there is I've just included the membership fees for being a member of Women in Recruitment, just to show how accessible they are. And then you basically, the next page is sharing with you what we have coming up and the types of events that we've got coming up. So, perfect. It's really strange not changing the pages myself. So again, Katie, thank you so much for going through that and sharing it with us and answering our questions. That's brilliant. These are some of the events that we've got coming up. On the 3rd of July, we've got a lunch for business leaders. Mark Schrack from Dale Carnegie, he'll be facilitating a discussion around gender diversity on the board, developing and retaining your female talent. Our speed mentoring event earlier this year in London went down really well. So we've managed to juggle our timetable. We're fitting another one in November in London. We are waiting for dates to be confirmed for holding a speed mentoring in Birmingham. We're hoping for a July date. And we have got a date now confirmed for Manchester. I think it's the 20th of October. That got finalised yesterday afternoon. We host a webinar every 2 months. The next topics for the next 2 webinars are communicating with clarity and confidence, ensuring your candidates' communications are appropriate, effective and successful. And the one in September is about how to make your money work harder for you. What we're trying to do is we're trying to get topics that are aimed at leaders and topics that are aimed at recruiters. And so if there are any topics you're interested in or you'd like us to investigate and get a speaker on, then please do let us know. We also hold regular lunches, dinners, and we're planning some summer drinks. Again, we're just waiting for a venue and location to be confirmed. All our events are now on our website, so thank you, Gayatri, for that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
If you do have any questions, if you go to the next page first, Gayatri, our contact details are there. So Julie is our contact within Women in Recruitment. So if you want to find out more about Women in Recruitment, the Power of Me, feel free to contact any of us, actually. Katie's happy to have conversations as well. But if you want to approach Katie directly regarding Engaging Performance, her company, then there are her contact details as well. So I think that about covers it all, unless there's anything you guys want to add to the wrap-up of this.
So just another thing, because after the webinar, I found the webinar really useful for personal self-reflection. I think sometimes it can be very underrated, but I think this kind of tools can really help us understand how it can shape a career. So you guys should definitely give it a try by checking out. Like, there'll be more details about it on the website. We put a couple of videos about how Power of Me and can help shape your career, and as well as about the strength scope in particular. So you can check it out on the Women in Recruitment website. Just a second, as I speak, I just received another question.
Okay. Yes, go for it.
So someone had asked whether we would be sending this presentation as a link. Yes, we would be posting the recording on the website, and it's usually available for the members to access. So we will be posting it on the website, and we will be letting you know.
Because we have had this webinar open for everybody, haven't we? Because we're sharing about
Power
of Me.
Yeah. So Power of Me, since it's open for everyone, I think it's available. So I would be sending it as a mail probably to all those who registered for the webinar. So you will receive it. So that's not a problem. And so you can check more details about it. And if you have any queries, you can always contact Julie. And if you have any content-related queries that you would like to know, please contact Katie Button, and her email address is right there. And if there's anything else, that's about it.
Brilliant.
Thank you so much, Katie,
No,
for your
well, thank
wonderful
you.
webinar.
Oh, you're very
And thank you,
welcome.
Nicola,
Thank
for
you, Nicola.
joining us for the webinar as well. Thank you so much. So,
Brilliant.
looking forward to more
Thank you,
from
everybody else,
women in
for tuning in,
recruitment.
and have a wonderful afternoon.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, bye.
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 See you.
Take care.